Okay. Well, first, thank you very much for the opportunity to attend the conference and to read this very interesting and important research. So I'll start with just a brief overview of the paper. I won't go into too much detail since you just saw the presentation. So the main motivation for this study was this finding from some of their earlier work that the representative pay program is severely underutilized. And the question that the authors are trying to ask here is this something that we need to be concerned about? And they find that about 85%, or the majority of people in their study, in their sample, have some form of help through informal caregivers, so a spouse, a child, some other relative. And so that's the good news. Most people do have some form of help, and they also find that this help it is successful in preventing people from, facing trouble with their finances. So it improves their financial well-being and also their psychological well-being. In the paper, they also look at anxiety as a measure of well-being, and they find that there is an improvement in that when people with dementia have help from informal caregivers. So I think this is important, but at the same time, sort of the last point that Jeff concluded with is that you still have a significant number of people in the sample that have dementia and do not receive any kind of help. And this is about between 13 to 15%, which is not a small number. And they also find that people who do not receive help, they're twice more likely than someone who does not have any kind of cognitive impairment to report that they have difficulty paying their bills or paying for food and basic utilities. So this, I think, is an important number. It also does not capture cases where someone may be receiving help, but that help is insufficient, or that their finances are still being mismanaged, or in more extreme cases where they're being abused. There are stories and cases where people with dementia are being abused by their caregivers. In general, one report found that people who are over 60, about 1 in 10 individuals who are over 60 face some form of abuse. This is not just financial abuse, this is all forms of abuse, but financial abuse is certainly part of that. And this number is probably an underestimate because such cases are underreported. And so I think it is important to sort of think about what can we do about cases where someone has dementia and is not able to receive that help. So in terms of thinking about kind of what are the policy implications of these findings, I want to talk a little bit about sort of policies that were not mentioned. So the representative pay program is one policy, but there has also been progress in the policy arena, especially related to sort of in the area of health policy, especially related to caregiving for older adults. So for example, the 2010 Affordable Care Act included provisions that specifically aim to reduce the amount of elder abuse. There are grants available to state and local agencies that are meant to support programs that raise awareness or provide other kinds of, or prevent abuse, provide other kinds of support to individuals. However, the majority, most of the responsibility still lies with the individuals and the families, and you kind of see this with the 85% number. Most individuals rely on their families to provide any kind of care, and this is especially true when you're thinking about something like financial management. This is not something that people are very willing to turn over to other individuals. And the burden of this kind of caregiving will only increase over time given that we have an aging population. So I think it's kind of important to think about kind of in the future, what can we do about this and how can we help individuals and families. So one of the sort of suggestions for future work or sort of comments, which I don't know how feasible it will be, but this is something that I would like to ask the authors to think about is to try and understand the interaction between formal and informal networks in providing care or providing kind of advice on financial management. So to what extent do we see that families, that individuals are relying on their families because they feel that they are not getting sufficient help from formal sources? And so is the 85%, is that so large because they don't have access, or they have access but they're not aware of it, or it's kind of difficult to utilize these other resources? So this is something that I think would be important to look into. So essentially, are formal sources of care and informal sources of care, are they substitutes or are they complements? Are families that do not have help from are individuals who do not have help from families or from informal sources, are they able to rely on formal networks? And what is the sort of the quality of care that individuals are getting? I think this is a tough question. I'm not sure if the data exists in the NHATS. I do know that the NHATS has some information on whether caregivers access other sources, like more formal sources of care, and so I think that is something that can be addressed with this data set. But maybe to look into sort of more deeply what is the quality of care that is being provided, that may require some additional sort of data sources or data collection efforts. But I think it's important. This study is a first step because it looks at sort of financial well-being in terms of some very basic measures. So are they able to pay for rent? Are they able to pay for food? But you might still have cases where someone does not report trouble paying for basic necessities, but they might still their assets might still be mismanaged or and so on. So I think that's something that could be sort of looked into in more detail in the future. Overall, I think it is an interesting study. I think the authors, it's a very clear question that they ask in the study, and they give a very clear answer. And I think it's interesting because it answers some questions, but it also raises a lot more questions. So I think that that is something that I really enjoyed about the paper. And so I'll end there. Thank you.